We live in a world that demands your attention, your opinion, your outrage. Every day you're pulled into emotional chaos. Someone says something offensive, someone disappoints you, something doesn't go your way, and you're expected to react loudly, immediately, emotionally. But here's the truth. If you react to everything, you are owned by everything. You are predictable, controllable, and from a Jungian perspective, that means you're not free. You're a puppet of your own unconscious. Carl Jung didn't define strength by how much you can feel. He defined it by how deeply you can understand. Not repress, not avoid, but see clearly. He believed that real inner power comes from stepping outside your reactive self, from watching the chaos instead of being consumed by it. He called this process individuation, the path of becoming a whole, self-aware individual, free from the automatic programs of ego and emotion. But to even begin that journey, you must first realize one thing: not every feeling deserves a response. Not every battle is yours to fight, and not every provocation needs your energy. But before we go deeper, write in the comments where you're watching from. Let's see who's waking up. Because this message isn't for the naive or the soft-hearted. It's for those who've felt themselves being pulled into drama, pain, and manipulation, and who are finally ready to stop bleeding energy for things that don't deserve it. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What does that mean? It means every time you explode with anger, fall apart from rejection, or chase after someone who mistreats you, it's not really you making the decision. It's the wounded parts of you, the unexamined parts, the old hidden stories you've never looked at. You're not choosing, you're reacting. And the more you react, the less power you have. This is why emotional detachment is so powerful and so misunderstood. It's not about becoming cold. It's not about never feeling anything. It's about feeling everything, but not letting it run your life. It's the ability to step back and observe without being consumed. It's when you stop fighting every fire and start asking why the fire even started in the first place. When you do that, you gain something rare, inner space. And in that space, you find clarity, direction power. Most people believe that their emotions are spontaneous. Something happens, and they feel something in response. Anger, fear, sadness, guilt. It feels natural. It feels immediate. But what if it's not? What if every emotional spiral you've ever been pulled into didn't start with what just happened, but with something much older, deeper, and largely unconscious? Carl Jung didn't see emotions as isolated reactions. He saw them as signals, clues pointing to something unintegrated in the psyche. He believed that most emotional chaos is the result of unresolved inner conflicts, wounds we've buried, and false identities we've clung to. What you call emotion is often the ego panicking because the story it's built around you is starting to crack. When you feel triggered, it's not just because someone was rude or something didn't go your way. It's because a part of you, usually hidden, is being threatened. Maybe it's your need to be seen as strong, or your fear of being abandoned, or the desperate desire to prove you're enough. These parts form what Jung called complexes, autonomous emotional patterns that hijack your behavior. Once they're activated, you're no longer thinking clearly, you're reacting. And that reaction feels like the truth, but it isn't. And here's where the system comes in, because when you're in that state, emotionally raw, unstable, over-identifying with the moment, you are highly manipulable. People can sell to you, influence you, control you. Political movements thrive on it. Marketing departments study it. Narcissists exploit it. The more emotionally reactive you are, the easier you are to predict. And predictability is power for anyone trying to use you. This is why emotional detachment is not coldness. It's clarity. It's the ability to take a step back and say, wait, whose emotion is this really? Is this mine, or is it a reaction to someone else's chaos? Is this from today, or from a wound I never healed? Detachment lets you pause long enough to ask the hard questions. Not to numb yourself, but to see yourself, because that's the root of real inner strength. It's not about shutting down. It's about seeing the mechanism that was operating in the dark and deciding consciously to no longer let it drive you. Jung believed that you don't truly grow until you begin to confront your own unconscious, the emotions you can't explain, the reactions that feel disproportionate, the insecurities that keep resurfacing. They're not proof that something's wrong with you. They're proof that something deeper wants to be acknowledged. Emotional detachment gives you the space to do that without drowning in the process. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Nowhere is this more obvious than in the emotional patterns we call complexes. And if you've never heard the term, don't let it fool you. It's not just psychology jargon. It's the invisible script that's been dictating your reactions, your relationships, your breakdowns, and your guilt loops for years. A complex is not just a feeling. It's a tightly bound cluster of emotions, memories, and beliefs that live in your unconscious mind, waiting to be activated. And once they are, they take over. Think of it like this. You walk into a room and someone makes a harmless comment, but suddenly you feel attacked, unworthy, even enraged. Why? Because it touched a nerve, one you didn't know was still raw. That nerve is a complex. Jung noticed that these complexes operate with a frightening autonomy. They have a voice, a tone, even a personality. One moment you're calm, grounded, in control, and the next, something in you snaps. You're saying things you don't mean, drowning in shame or shutting down completely. That's not just emotion. That's possession. You've been hijacked by an unresolved part of yourself. This is where emotional detachment becomes powerful, not as avoidance, but as awareness. Most people try to override these triggers by being stronger, more disciplined, or just letting it go. But that doesn't work when you're being pulled by something you can't see. You don't fix what's unconscious by pretending it's not there. You fix it by seeing it for what it is, a part of you that never got the chance to grow up. Here's what makes this dangerous. The world exploits your complexes. Narcissists sense your guilt complex and manipulate it. Abusers smell your fear of abandonment and twist it. Institutions prey on your shame, your need for approval, your fear of failure. And they don't need to say a word. They just push the right button. And you react like clockwork. You fight, defend, collapse, obey. But what happens when you stop reacting? When you feel the complex stir and choose not to follow it? That's where strength is born. That's the beginning of detachment, not because you don't care, but because you finally see the game. Jung didn't believe in perfection. He believed in integration. That means acknowledging the parts of you that are still raw, still reactive, still shaped by past wounds, and deciding not to be ashamed of them, but to reclaim them. That's what weakens the complex. That's what returns your energy to your center. Most people think emotional detachment means pushing feelings away, ignoring pain, or pretending not to care. But Carl Jung's view was radically different. He didn't advocate for emotional coldness. He warned against emotional blindness. What he called the shadow isn't your enemy. It's the version of you that was buried because it didn't fit the image you were told to uphold. So what does this have to do with detachment? Everything. Emotional detachment, when rooted in Jung's framework, isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming free. Free from the emotional reactions that hijack you. Free from the internal chaos that erupts every time you're triggered. Free from the parts of you you've disowned. That freedom doesn't come from suppression. It comes from integration. To integrate the shadow is to face the things about yourself that you've denied. Your rage, envy, pettiness, neediness, judgment, shame. It's uncomfortable. It breaks your self-image. But Jung believed that until we look directly at our darkness, we'll project it onto others. We'll call them toxic, controlling, arrogant, or weak, when really we're seeing reflections of our own undealt with fragments. That's why people repeat the same emotional patterns for years. They think they're just unlucky in love, or born sensitive, or surrounded by manipulators, when in fact they're replaying their shadow on loop. Emotional detachment gives you space to see the shadow instead of acting it out. It puts a gap between stimulus and response. Someone disrespects you? Instead of snapping or retreating, you pause. You feel the anger rise, but you observe it instead of becoming it. That pause is detachment. That pause is power. It allows you to respond from clarity, not from your complex. It makes you dangerous in the best way, not reactive, not controllable, not predictable. But this isn't easy. The shadow fights back. It wants to be seen, but it also wants to survive on its own terms. It whispers old stories to you. You're not good enough. They'll abandon you. You have to prove yourself. These are emotional parasites that feed on your attention, and if you don't detach from them, they will run your life and call it personality. So here's the practice. When an emotion flares up, especially the intense ones like rage, humiliation, or jealousy, don't suppress it, and don't act on it either. Instead, observe it. Ask, where have I felt this before? Whose voice is this really? What part of me is still bleeding that this emotion is trying to protect? Emotional detachment lets you ask the question before you act. And that moment of pause is where the unconscious becomes conscious. Let's be honest. Emotional detachment is not just difficult, it's actively discouraged. Why? Because we live in a world that profits from your reactivity. Every platform, every ad, every outrage cycle is designed to keep you hooked, to provoke, to inflame, to pull you back into the game. Jung understood this long before the digital age. He warned that modern man is in danger of being swallowed by mass consciousness, by ideologies, groupthink, and collective emotion. And the more you identify with these currents, the less you know yourself. Look around. Social media doesn't reward stillness, it rewards outrage. The algorithm doesn't elevate clarity, it elevates conflict. In this world, detachment isn't just rare, it's rebellious. Because the moment you stop reacting, the moment you step back from the noise, the system loses its grip on you. You stop being predictable, you stop being marketable, you stop being manipulated. This is why most people can't go a day without checking their phone, engaging in pointless arguments, or chasing someone's approval. They think they're just staying informed, staying connected, staying in the loop. But really, they're addicted to emotional engagement, to being triggered, to being part of the drama, even if it drains them. Jung would say, this is what happens when your inner life is empty. You look outward for meaning, for identity, for stimulation. And the world is more than happy to supply it at the cost of your peace. So what does emotional detachment look like in this context? It's not apathy, it's not retreating to a cave or pretending not to care about the world. No, true detachment is presence without entanglement. It's reading the news without being consumed by it. It's disagreeing with someone without the need to destroy them. It's loving someone without clinging to them. It's knowing when to speak and when silence says more. And here's the thing, when you reach this level of inner autonomy, you become unnerving. Not loud, not aggressive, but still, unshakable. People can't figure you out. They'll test you, poke at you, try to pull you back into old patterns, but you won't bite. And that's what unnerves them. You're no longer playing by emotional rules they've come to rely on. You're operating on a different frequency, and they feel it. Carl Jung called this individuation the process of becoming a whole differentiated self. It means stepping out of the collective trance. It means recognizing that the emotional hook society dangles in front of you, status, popularity, outrage, fear, are not real power. Your real power is in not taking the bait. Detachment is not emotional deadness. It's emotional maturity. It's the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by what you feel. And in a world built on emotional manipulation, that kind of clarity is rare. That kind of strength is revolutionary. If you've ever felt like you were losing yourself in a relationship, constantly trying to be enough, do enough, give enough, you already understand what Jung meant when he said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The question is, are you being transformed or are you being consumed? Emotional detachment doesn't mean withdrawing from love or closing yourself off. It means refusing to sacrifice your identity for connection. It means being able to love someone without losing your center. Jung emphasized the importance of integration, bringing the unconscious into consciousness, making the hidden parts of yourself visible. In relationships, this means you can't rely on another person to fill your inner voids. You can't expect someone else to complete you if you haven't met yourself first. Most people confuse attachment with intimacy. They think needing someone means loving them. They think anxiety is proof of depth. But that's not love. That's dependence. That's trying to use someone else as a shield from your own inner chaos. And when they stop playing that role, when they set a boundary or pull away, you panic. Because the truth is, it was never about them. It was about control, about making someone else responsible for your emotional stability. Emotional detachment breaks that cycle. It's the ability to be fully present with someone while remaining fully rooted in yourself. It's not detachment from people, it's detachment from expectation, from fantasy, from the compulsive need to manage how others see you or feel about you. Jung believed the healthiest relationships are not those without conflict, but those where both people are individuated, whole on their own, yet willing to meet in truth. No masks, no manipulation, no roles to perform, just presence. And that presence becomes powerful when it isn't fueled by fear of abandonment or the need to be validated. It's love without strings, connection without cages. This kind of detachment changes how you communicate. You no longer argue to win, you speak to understand. You don't give to be owed. You give because you choose to. You don't chase apologies that will never come. You offer forgiveness without needing to reopen the wound. It's not weakness, it's emotional sovereignty. And yes, this might cost you some relationships. People who depended on your emotional chaos to feel important might fall away. Those who only felt close to you when you were broken might no longer feel connected. Let them go. Because what you're building now is real, a grounded life, free from the need to perform, control, or be controlled. What happens when the emotional noise finally fades? When you're no longer caught in the cycle of constant reaction, validation seeking, and anxiety? For the first time, you're left with silence. And for many people, that silence is terrifying. Because without the chaos, without the drama, without the old identities built on pain, what's left? Just you, and that's where your real life begins. Carl Jung understood that most people are so fused with their emotions that they mistake them for truth. They let anger define their direction, let fear dictate their limits, let longing tell them who to chase and what to chase after. But Jung's work reminds us that emotions, while deeply human, are not the self. They are experiences, transient signals meant to be observed, not obeyed. When you detach emotionally, you create space between the stimulus and your response. You stop acting on impulse. You start asking questions instead. Why did that trigger me? Why did I need them to understand me? Why am I still looking for something outside to fill this space inside? In that space, something profound begins to form, clarity, a kind of quiet inner knowing. You begin to see people as they are, not as you need them to be. You stop arguing with reality. You stop expecting broken people to give you wholeness or chaotic situations to give you peace. And from that place of clarity, you start to make decisions that are not based on emotion, but on alignment with your values, your boundaries, and your true self. And here's the powerful part. Once you see through the illusion of emotional dependence, you can no longer be manipulated. You can no longer be baited into fights that don't matter, shamed into apologies you don't owe, or guilted into staying where your soul is shrinking. Your detachment becomes armor, not a wall that keeps the world out, but a frame that keeps you standing no matter what comes in. This doesn't mean you feel nothing. Quite the opposite. You still feel deeply, but you're no longer ruled by those feelings. You acknowledge them, you honor them, but you don't serve them. You choose your response with intention, not desperation. And that's what makes you dangerous to anyone who once thrived on your emotional instability. Jung believed that true transformation comes when we no longer seek to avoid pain, but to understand it. When we no longer chase fleeting highs, but walk toward inner balance. Emotional detachment is not the end of your emotional life. It's the beginning of your emotional mastery. Once you begin practicing emotional detachment, something strange happens. People don't know what to do with you anymore. The same behaviors that used to trigger you, you meet them with silence. The guilt trips, the passive aggression, the emotional manipulation. You see it for what it is, a test, and you no longer feel compelled to pass it. You realize that not everything requires your defense. Not every accusation deserves a reply. And not every conflict is an invitation to lose your peace. Carl Jung knew that when a person becomes deeply self-aware, when they've made peace with their own inner world, they stop playing roles that aren't theirs to play. They don't jump into battles just because someone's expecting them to. They don't explain themselves to people, committed to misunderstanding them. And they don't chase after anyone who mistakes their absence for weakness. This is what it means to become emotionally untouchable, not numb, not closed off, but immovable in your center, grounded in your sense of worth. You still feel everything, but you're no longer controlled by anything. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you sovereign. You'll notice something else, too. The people who once fed off your emotional responses will either try harder to get a rise out of you, or they'll fall away entirely. Why? Because emotional detachment exposes every game. When you don't react, you interrupt the script. You return the problem to its rightful owner, and that is unbearable for anyone who depended on your guilt, fear, or people-pleasing to keep you small. In a society that thrives on outrage, validation loops, and emotional chaos, the person who stays composed becomes a threat. The person who doesn't flinch becomes a mirror. And what you reflect in your calm is all the noise other people are running from. Jung called this individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are. It's not about being above others, it's about being centered within yourself. And from that center, you no longer beg for peace. You carry it. You no longer perform for love. You embody it. You no longer plead for clarity. You live from it. But here's the test. Can you hold your emotional ground when someone you care about tries to pull you back into the old version of you? Can you stay detached when detachment costs you connection? Because not everyone will celebrate your transformation, especially the ones who benefited from your lack of boundaries. If you've made it this far, you already know something most people don't. Inner strength doesn't come from how loud you are, how tough you appear, or how many people validate your choices. It comes from how well you know yourself and how willing you are to walk alone rather than stay somewhere that demands you betray that self. Emotional detachment, the kind Carl Jung spoke of, is not about isolation. It's about purification. It's the shedding of false responsibilities, inherited guilt, and performative empathy. It's the moment you stop showing up for roles you were never meant to play: peacemaker, savior, fixer, emotional crutch. And when that shedding begins, so does the grief. Not just for the relationships you lose, but for the version of you that had to keep everyone else comfortable at the cost of your own peace. Because make no mistake, there is a cost. You will lose things, you will lose people, you will lose illusions you held onto for years. But what you gain is priceless: sovereignty, emotional clarity, the unshakable strength that comes from no longer needing to be needed in order to feel worthy. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, when the silence feels louder than the chaos ever did, when you question whether the calm you've built is worth the connections you've lost. That's natural, that's human. But the longer you live from your center, the more you'll see what Jung meant when he said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When you finally stop reacting, you stop being ruled, you stop being predictable, you stop living on other people's timelines driven by their approval or disapproval. And from that stillness, you begin to act, not from fear, not from obligation, not from emotional desperation, but from grounded, intentional presence. That's what makes you powerful. That's what makes you dangerous. So here's what I'll leave you with. Not everyone will understand your evolution. Many will call it distance, coldness, arrogance. But that's only because your detachment threatens the dynamics they were comfortable in. Let them be confused. Let them project. You don't need to convince them of anything. The only thing you owe now is to stay loyal to the peace you've worked so hard to find. If this message spoke to something in you, write it in the comments. I choose peace over performance. Because that's what emotional detachment really is, the end of performing and the beginning of freedom.